Good evening and good morning, dear participants. This is Berin Lukas, Head Department of Sociology and Industrial Relations, St. Joseph's College, Bengaluru. On behalf of our principal, Reverend Father Dr. Victor Lobo, staff and students, I extend to you a very warm welcome to this webinar, Human Resource Management Post-COVID-19. It is also my privilege to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished speakers, Dr. M.F. Jose and Shri S. Mohan Raj. I thank all the participants for registering with us. Welcome once again and thank you.
Good evening, dear academicians and students from India and 6 other countries. I am G. Anuplal from the Department of Industrial Relations, St. Joseph's College, Bengaluru. On behalf of my principal and head of the department and the organizing committee, it's my privilege to introduce the first resource person for the day. A well-known industrial and organizational psychologist, Dr. M.F. Jose is the co-founder and the principal consultant of Dept, a HR consulting company. An alumnus of Christ College, Bangalore University and Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, Dr. Jose began his career 2 decades ago teaching psychology at Bangalore University, Bengaluru, and later moved to the corporate world, holding several leadership positions in HR at Equity, Bell International, Deutsche Bank, Airtel, Wipro, and Verizon. During his student days, Dr. M.F. Jose was elected Vice President of Christ College Students' Union. Dr. M.F. Jose is a visiting faculty at Indian Institute of Technology, Chennai, and IIIT, Andhra Pradesh. He is a research guide at Symbiosis University, Pune. He is a certified organizational development consultant from NTM, United States of America. Dr. Jose actively supports the cause for educating underprivileged children. Dr. Jose has been associated with St. Joseph's College in 2 capacities. He was associated with our college National Service Scheme unit as member board of advisors during 1998-2002. He has been a guest speaker at various functions organized by the student body of the Department of Industrial Relations, the Industrial Relations Forum. Dear Dr. Jose, I request you to make your presentation.
Thanks, thanks, Berin ma'am and Anuplal and the organizing committee. Thanks for the introduction and having me here for this webinar, which is largely on human resource management post-COVID. So thank you for all of that. Am I audible? And just wanted to just check if everything is fine for me to begin with.
Yes, sir. You are audible. Everything is fine. You may please proceed.
Okay. So I'm just going to share my presentation. I have prepared a presentation by looking at some primary and secondary research, which is current, which is local, which is global, and based on some of the anecdotal information that I have collected and collated over a period of the last 2-3 months. So it's basis that what I'm trying to talk about, and then post the presentation, I know we have a second speaker, and after that we will go ahead with the Q&A. So I'm just sharing my presentation. Is this now visible to all of you?
Yes, it is visible.
Thank you. So largely Qubels is into psychometric assessment, leadership as a development and all of that, and that's where I focus on. So thanks for this, and good evening to all the participants. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are part of the globe. I guess there are people who have logged in from different parts of the globe as well. The way I have structured my presentation is to kind of give you an overview. This is largely the economic overview. It will also have, some inputs about the labor in terms of where we are specifically prior to the COVID-19. We can then look at how is the COVID impacting the industry in certain terms of HRM. What are the current challenges that we see in the new situation that we are entering? And there are some way forward suggestions that are also there. And in the next 30 minutes or so, that's how I have kind of structured the whole presentation. So to begin with, look at the left side of the graph, which is the population growth. We are close to 130 billion people in the country today in terms of population, and why I've compared it with China is because we are second, and somewhere during 2030s, in a decade from now, we are going to overtake them, which means so much of mouths to feed, so much of employment, so much of resources, so much of infrastructure, and that's what it is. The next slide, the graph talks about the employment from 1995 to 2020, which is 2020 is more of a indicator. I'm sure that this was probably done 6 months ago. So 1995 is significant because that's when the economy opened up, and you will see large number of FDIs and competition that started up within the economy when the economy opened up. So that was one of the thrusts for a huge workforce to come and the employment to surge to what we are today. On a different platter, if you look at the mobile subscribers today in India, and these are all in millions, which is 2019 Q3, just before the coronavirus started, we are pretty huge in terms of the tele density. That's the other perspective. So I will probably give in information and inputs and then tie up all of these things. If you look at the GDP growth, from 2017, the GDP is coming down. If you see the extreme left bar, which is the world, advanced economies, the emerging markets, and the last one to the right is India, which is the dark blue. So the projected GDP for us is around 2.5 this year, which means, the demand, the supply, there's going to be a lot of impact that we are foreseeing from all of these things. As it is, the GDP was falling down. Now, if you look at from a global hunger index, which is one of the recent last year's ranking, India ranks 102nd out of 117 qualifying countries. So which means we are not doing there. There is a clear-cut poverty that you will see, again, probably going up, though it was coming down. These are all interrelated to what I'm talking about in terms of employment, in terms of population, in terms of what we're trying to do. Keeping this landscape, I will move on to the sectors in industry. Largely, we have classified into primary, secondary, tertiary. You are aware that there is a good interconnection that is required from primary, secondary, and tertiary. Somebody who wants to run a juice shop should get the material and then probably process it through some secondary and then go to the retail, which is the end point. Again, you can organize it in terms of organized sector, basically, which means they comply to the law of the land and will follow the processes. Employee rights or worker rights are guaranteed compared to the unorganized sector. However, a large chunk of our population is largely unorganized. Then you have the regular urban workers, rural workers, you have the casual as well as urban and rural divide. But if you look at from a skill perspective, you have unskilled, semi-skilled, skilled, and highly skilled. And this is largely because, the kind of nature of business that we do, especially in the tertiary, it is important for us to hire the right set of people and compensate them in the right way so that, there is a lot of parity and fairness in terms of why we do, and we get the right talent. And of course, the public and the private sectors. One is managed by the government, and the other is by any private entity. where the profit is the key motive in terms of the sector. Close to 55 crore is our total working population, which is 50% of our total population, of which 14 crores are migrant workers, and within that 55 you will have 8 crore as self-employed. Largely you will have unorganized sector here. If you look at a private sector, organized, skilled to highly skilled will be a small chunk, which is again urban. Now, if you look at the graphs at the bottom, how wages have come down over a period of time, both for high skilled and low skilled. In 2016, it was 43,000 per month. These are all averages. Sorry, 47,000 to how it's come down to 43,000. Likewise, if you look at the low skilled wages, from 13,500 per month to 10,900 is what we see as a decline. So, which means, there has been some challenges in the economy. It's not that everything was perfect, and COVID had to come and just make things worse for us. So there is a situation that was not so great. Now, if you look at the conditions of workers, this is an ILO survey where 31% of our workers are working in unhealthy conditions. We have 13.2% of female workers, women workers who work more than 48 hours a week, and this is all sectors. It's just not one sector. And 28% of our male workers work more than 48 hours a week. So, 48,000 people died due to accidents at workplaces. This is some of the 2019 data. So, which is also a big chunk where we need to look at industrial safety, security, and also some of the security measures for the families, and also the welfare aspects is something that we need to look at and consider. Moving on, from a global rights index, which is basically, this is a index which started many years ago, and it basically measures the rights of the workers on the 5-point scale, as you've seen there. Sporadic violations of rights, no guarantee. If you look at where we are today, we are we are not so good, and we are on this continuum on the scale. We are on 5, which means there are no guaranteed rights. They look at various parameters. There is a report out there. I have given all the references in my slide deck, so you can always go and verify. So from a rights index, I think we are not doing good. Internet users in millions, 564 million users use internet. On the other side, we saw close to 600 odd million people use mobile phones. And that's another interesting aspect to consider, how digital we are. And the projections are pretty huge in terms of how we are projected for the next 2-3 years. Interestingly, these are paradoxes. If you look at all of these things, in spite of that, an Indian worker is very, very happy. The job satisfaction is the highest. And if you look at the source, which is poll is of around 13,600 plus employees of 34 countries. And this is of Q4 2019. I would say that, this is probably slightly skewed as well, because it would have probably looked at a certain segment of the industry or the economy of workers. So irrespective of that, I think it is important to consider that while we are saying on one side, the rights are not so, respectfully given or maintained, but at the other side, we have a good job satisfaction that is there. Moving on, this kind of gives a participation of women in the economy. Where we have a challenges on the wage equality. I don't think there is wage parity. Participation of women workforce is very less compared to the male. Whereas when it comes to education and employability, there is a good number of women employees or women who are employable. But again, the percentage is very less. And if you see the gender diversity by sector, largely these are all technology, pharma, the new gen companies that you see, where of course manufacturing is also 26%. However, there is also a gender gap in the pay. This is the median gross hourly wage, so there is clear discrepancy. This could be one of the big challenges. 14% of women run their own entrepreneurship ventures, and the large chunk would get into micro enterprises, which is self-financed. The slide on top is very interesting. If you look at the women's job is to cook, clean, wash, and man's job is to go ahead and work. So that mindset has to change. One of the examples that I can talk about is just coming up is in terms of the domestic violence during the lockdown. So this gives a quick snapshot about women in the economy. Very important to have equal parity as well in terms of the economic freedom and various other aspects. Now let me move into talking about the industry and the evolution of the industrial revolution, and how the human resources moved along with it. You see the extreme left, 1784, the mechanical loom, mass production, division. So you had water, steam. Those were the kind of things typically called as Industrial Revolution 1. 1870, the first assembly line, and that's where the division of labor started for the economies of scale. Moving on to the third industrial revolution, that's where the first IT systems, automation started. And that's where probably the first time we will see human resources folks in terms of labor welfare officers, administrative IR, where a lot of factories, collective bargaining, all of those kind of things started from then. Moving on to 2010, 2011, post the slowdown, where Industry 4 was largely digitization. So we moved from automation to digitization, where we have integration between human and technology. Human resources moved completely digital. There are very many companies that are still lagging behind. Centers of excellence started for talent assessment, talent development, talent acquisition, organizational development. And the HR folks are largely seen as employee champions and change agents. So earlier in the last three industrial revolutions, it was low trust, a lot of collective bargaining, but here it was focused on specific skills. It moved to individual bargaining rather than collective bargaining. So you will have compensation, which is very different. You will still have parity differences in the digitized world. As we move today to the next industrial revolution, which is Industry 5.0, where it's going to be personalization. The large focus would be IoT, sustainability, renewable resources. How can we personalize? And it wouldn't be a surprise thing that if a colleague of ours would be a robo who is interfacing with large things and would communicate with us like another human, but without a machine. And so if you look at the scale in terms of the timeline at the bottom, it started as welfare management, it moved to labor management, personal management. Slowly in the 80s, it moved to human resource management. So from a very administrative roles, it moved to a little more of fine strategic ways. And from 2000 onwards, it has moved to largely strategic human resource management. So while the industry has evolved and is evolving, human resources also has evolved over a period of time. There are so many practices that we don't do today, but might still be relevant. And digital is something that human resources is embracing currently. I'm talking about formal sectors, which are private largely, where you will see scale, where you see global companies, advancement in science and technology. Probably this does not signify every other sector that I was talking about earlier. The traditional HRM is to attract, recruit, onboard, enable people, develop them for the right set of skills. Once they are trained, how do we ensure that they grow, they retain with us, and then inevitably, sometimes there has to be a separation. Now, this moved many years ago to, I'm using a Harvard model of strategic HRM. Why I put the slide is to actually show you from a very mundane 8 set of tasks to a very, very specific understanding a stakeholder interest. It could be, the employee groups, it could be the government, the community, the investors, and then looking at what are some of the situational factors around what is conducive, what are the management philosophy, what is the law, what is the available technology, what are some of those critical characteristics that are available in the landscape today for us, and then to evolve HR policies to look at building those outcomes, which will actually then help engage and retain employees. That's the philosophy. So you have a policy which will give you results. That results will help you sustain. So this is how the whole shift happened from many hundred years of what we're talking about as the traditional personal management to strategic HR management. Now, coming to COVID. Today, if you look at the way this pandemic has impacted us, this is the figures which is as of today we have. This is the latest numbers. I just got it a few hours back. The numbers are increasing, and globally as well as the pandemic has gone to some 77 million, and we've had close to 4.29 lakh deaths. In India, it's surging. Cities everywhere are reporting a larger number of cases. Now, what does this mean to us? We went through lockdown, assuming that we had 5 phases of lockdown and, unlock 1. If you look at the collage that I have presented here, this also, gives you a very clear urban-rural divide. We had the clear migrant problems, which kind of was really a heartburn. People walked. There were people who were sitting at home and watching. You see the way they, moved. The sad part is we've had close to around 200 to 300 deaths, some due to starvation, some due to migrant accidents, suicides. Then we have had people working from home. Working from home is completely a different concept for many people, unless the IT sector, which was quite used to it, and few other sectors which were quite used to it. But with lockdown, wherever there was a possible infrastructure, subscription to all sorts of telecast and channels went up. People were watching various programs and relaxing. Social distancing came as a norm. People were largely confined to indoors, and economy was down because the supply demand came down, consumption was less, the supply chain itself was choked. Now, moving on, if you look at the size of our lockdown, India has had the highest in terms of confinement. We've had 138 billion people, a big chunk of people indoors, which means, for almost 2 months, there was no economic activity, or probably very minimal economic activity. China, of course, had partial, United States were partial, and the rest of the numbers were not so, significant, though, of course, they did have a huge economic impact because some of those are emerging economies as well. If you look at some of the studies that were conducted, and one of the Lancet reported around 24 common studies documenting psychological impact of millions of people across because of the lockdown, fear of infection, frustration, inadequate supplies. I'm sure some of you who are watching this would have also felt some of these things at some point of time, that I'm infected, or I'm bored. Do we have enough supplies, to look at all of that. Stressors post-lockdown, fear of financial loss, risk of infection again, fear of becoming sick, losing loved ones, and loss of job, financial aspects. That is the other thing that came up. Some of the symptoms of psychological stress: low mood, irritability, lack of sleep, emotional exhaustion, and depression. Now, the study also talks about post-COVID, the chances of some of these coming back again, because typically we've seen after every disaster, when we go back to normalcy is when things go bad. So India also reported 100 plus suicides, lack of freedom of movement, loneliness, alcohol withdrawal, fear of infection, and stigma. So largely this was the impact psychologically and mentally, and the question of mental well-being. We've heard new terms: lockdown, social distancing, washing of hands for 20 seconds, masks, COVID. COVID is the one who doesn't wash hands, who doesn't maintain social distance, who doesn't wear masks, and so gets quarantined. And others who don't follow online learning and teaching like us, what we're doing now. So these are all the new words that we are seeing today. Now moving on to economy. Now this is a large study that was conducted 2 months ago, which comprises of around 317 companies by the FICCI. You look at the impact on the business. Of course, these were responded to by the senior management or entrepreneurs or people who were the key decision makers of these organizations. 53% felt or really see impact. Cash flow is a big source for running the whole organization, day-to-day operations, salaries, many other things. So decrease cash flow. Supply chains, of course, is going to have a solid impact on raw materials, especially companies that are global and where we have imports. Say, for example, chemical is one of the hard-hit sectors now. Even if people are ready to work, we may not have timely raw materials for people to come back and start working sometimes. There are stringent checks, as we had unlocked one recently. Only 30% of workforce is back. Work from home is going to be a new norm. And most of the people, at least 40% of them, predict that the normalcy is going to return only in 3 quarters. So, impact of COVID on the industry sector is this is again a second study by FICCI, where 190 companies, which range in terms of turnover from 1 crore to 98,000 crores, which is huge. And those are the sectors that I'm talking about, where the impact has been 72% adversely and 23% moderately. So the not so impacted are largely probably the IT and ITES, where they could easily shift work to home and could manage it. Now, if you look at the GDP and the different sector today, I've highlighted MSME. That's the biggest sector which contributes to GDP in the country, and we have 114 million people who work in the MSME sector, which is medium, small, and micro establishments, where the government currently is focusing on. And that's the reason why MSME has had a huge package for reviving the economy. Even if you look at the Index of Industrial Production, which is March report from the Ministry of one of the ministries of commerce, we'll see that the industrial production on the core 8 sectors have come down. Unemployment has touched almost 26%, and we are the 14th in terms of ranking when it comes to hiring and firing. And of course, I can vouch for this as a practitioner over the last 20 years that I've seen. Even in the organized sector, we've seen some kind of things. Now, what does this mean for us? Interestingly, companies are not meeting the revenue targets, job losses, salary cuts, high-risk service sectors like airlines, hospitality, hotels, multiplexes, restaurants, retailers, they're all impacted. This comprises a huge chunk. Companies are not meeting. So I was talking to a friend of mine who works with an FMCG, is a senior person there. This company used to have 300 crores as their quarterly revenue. Today are getting only 20 crores as their revenue. So look at the kind of pressure that they are on in terms of service, salaries, and a lot of other operating costs. We've had a lot of expats who are working in different companies have gone back. And it is just not the contract laborers or wage casual workers. It is including people in the formal sector, including multinational people from the multinational companies are also impacted. So what does this mean for us? From a HR perspective, from a strategic HR perspective, it is important for us to build credibility. Do I show the character of wanting to listen to people, empathize with them, demonstrate integrity, at the same time demonstrate competence in solving problems for people whenever there is a problem? And if I do that consistently, it builds trustworthiness and builds trust among my stakeholders. So this is another important part. We need to align for results. So in the new set of scheme of things, when we align for the new set of results, the roles will change, relationships will change, rules will change, and the risk appetite has to be different as well. So for example, roles will change. We are largely working from home, and that will continue to be aspect that you will see even after 3 or 4 quarters. So what kind of role do I play? How much can I contribute? How do I build relationship in a digital world? And what are some of the new rules that I need to make when we are, in a working in a distributed manner, more so when the workplace now is defined as home? What kind of risk appetite can I take is another defining aspect. Navigating paradox exists, when we have to live with contradictions. Say, for example, I need to work at the same time, and I also need to manage my family. There is slow, fast, there is good, evil. So the whole idea is, can I ask people to produce results right now, get it fast, and then at the same time say, no, I think we need to slow down. So one of the important parts that as a HR person we need to understand is, how will we manage the conflicting dichotomies, because of all the challenges that we are facing is going to be a bigger issue as we move to work back. The other interesting part is the 1.5 meter economy. Now this is going to be the new norm, where we have social distancing as one of the key aspects. So how do we arrange for transport? How do we arrange offices? What kind of flexibility do I give? What is the hygiene that I need to give? How does the meetings happen? How do we serve customers with 30% of people working from home? And at what cost can we serve customers? So this is a big challenge, and it is for the HR folks to work with the leaders and then figure out a way to still make business sense and business value for customers. Redefining businesses, I think this is another important aspect. The guy who used to sell flowers and bouquets in Chennai near my house has now moved to selling fruits and vegetables, because he knows nobody is going to buy bouquets, because we are now facing a lot of challenging times. Now businesses, so for example, you see Dunzo, you see Zomato, these were all food apps. They have started onto a different model to scale and see how can we redefine business, still deliver value to the customer and make our buck. So HR has a role to play there. How do we still intrinsically motivate people? One part is we have knowledge workers. So this caters to the large knowledge workers. Can we understand the employee view? Can I create opportunities for this person to work in his or her space, for him or her to be given autonomy, not micromanage, and communicate in a very constructive way so that the person understands what is a requirement and is very much intrinsically motivated to work. So these three, autonomy, relatedness, and competence, will be the keywords that the future HR would have to look at post the pandemic. Now, I know I have around 2-3 minutes. I'll run up fast. This is a typical disaster curve that you see. You have a response phase. Typically, when the disaster happens, you need to immediately respond, you need to revive, and you need to progress over a period of time, which means, from normal to new normal. If you see the first part of the phase, you will see around predictions are that it is around 4 to 8 months. And by the time we progress to new normal, it is likely to be 18 months. This is what I have seen from research and many of the anecdotal evidences that I have collated from global. I'm sure this is applicable to India as well. How do we respond? Employee safety, paramount. Home is a new workplace. So long working hours, unable to support family is not sustainable as a HR person. What is the difference that I'm going to make? Digital HRM is very critical for us to succeed in this way, to communicate and support. A lot of anxiety issues and morale and motivation can be addressed through those. Setting clear expectations, empowering people on goals rather than activity is the critical thing. Most important part is to take quick decisions with limited data. So which means, HR people will have to connect to business leaders, legal compliance, and various other sources to take the right set of decisions. Suspension of labor laws not gone well with people. The government of India has suspended some of the labor laws and rights, which is not the right thing to do. Lot of rumors, lot of doubts happen in the minds of employees. So how do you bring some kind of common repertoire of information, which will be a single source in the form of a website or some place where employees can access, will actually be helping to respond. How can we give frequent positive messages? I know while this is a challenge many times, I think it is important for us to consider this when things are not looking good. Need to form a think tank to focus on the problems and goals than taking some independent or arbitrary decisions going by the past. What are some of those actions that will have consequences on employee engagement, productivity? We need to think through. For example, sometimes when we lay off, I remember having gone through this exercise of laying off people in huge numbers. But the impact has been that when we go to the market to get new talent, people don't join. There is an offer decline. There is a bad social media. There's a bad press, and it takes time for us to recover from that. How do you implement a policy on hygiene, social distancing, and compliance? Very critical for us because employee hygiene and safety is important. It is also equally important for us to understand as a HR person who should come back. Should we look for a role rationalization? Are there roles that are getting redundant? Are there some roles that we don't need to have? While we talk about all of these things, how secure are we in terms of data? Because largely we're working from home. Are there going to be some breaches that can impact us? The most important thing is in terms of engagement and retention. See, people now in the last 2 months have figured out that they value family time and they were missing perspectives, some of them at least. While typically, I'm talking about the larger ITAs or other segments where the work is like for around 15 to 16 hours. Now they realize, so it's important for HR folks to realize that now they've tasted something which is different, work from home and being with family. How do I acclimatize them to a new environment? And it's time that organizations now start looking at a chief wellness officer. I think it's time for us to look at in the revive phase. And as we progress, it is important to look at redefining competencies for future skills. Virtual engagement and development is important. Employees forget whatever the training that they attend in classroom in probably 1 day or 2 days. So micro or bite-sized learning, which is small chunks of learning, very specific to the area of skill, not more than 40 minutes to 1 hour through a web or an e-learning mode is what is recommended. And dealing with post-COVID stress, psychological stress, typically, as I mentioned earlier, there is also going to be a huge pressure on people in terms of something that they've gone through and how will they cope up with that. So employee assistance groups, employee resource groups is something, we need to reboot as HR professionals. At the same time, we need to invest in developing leaders for the new normal, who are the ones who are showing tolerance to ambiguity, able to handle paradoxes, still communicate and manage the business and run to deliver value. I think that is another area. Distance socially, but don't isolate, because this is something that I've seen in many times when, for example, women go for maternity leave. Many times it's like we forget that. And when they're coming back is when we remember, oh, you were an employee with us. Now, this is another challenge. Flexible working options, gig workers, essential travel, And of course, I'm reading that 60 to 70% of budgets are going to be slashed for travel. So this is how typically a human resource management can traverse through respond, revive, and progress phases. These are some of the references. And, thank you very much. I guess I was on time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jose, for your excellent presentation. Now let me introduce our second speaker for this second international webinar hosted by the Department of Industrial Relations. I'm going to introduce a soldier who became a HR expert. Dear academicians and students, our second speaker, Mr. S. Mohan Raj, is a distinguished alumni of St. Joseph's College from the batch of 1991, BA, Industrial Relations, Economics, Sociology. During his student days at St. Joseph's College, Mr. Mohan Raj was a very, very active National Cadet Corps person. He was the MCC Naval Wing Cadet Captain of the college, who completed his C certificate with distinction. He led the Naval Wing during the Republic Day celebration of 1990 at Manekshaw Parade Grounds. He is very closely associated with St. Joseph's College even now as member Board of Studies in Industrial Relations and an active member of the Old Students Association of our college, which is celebrating its 100th year in this pandemic days of 2020. Mr. S. Mohan Raj is a senior industrial relations and HR professional of Bengaluru. Mr. Mohan Raj is at present Director, Human Resources, Silver Spark Apparels Limited, a unit of Raymond's Limited. He has managed different industry environments, pharmaceutical, educational, biotech, technology, production, media, etc. Mr. Mohan Raj is known as a collective bargaining expert in Bangalore HR circles. He is a very skilled industrial relations professional who has successfully engaged unionized workers and successfully signed 6 settlements through effective collective bargaining. Hearty welcome to you, dear alumni, Mr. S. Mohan Raj. Over to Mr. S. Mohan Raj, our second resource person for his presentation. Welcome, sir.
Very good evening to all the participants, faculty. Thank you, Professor Anup. Thank you, Professor. Sorry. Hello. Am I audible?
You are audible, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. I thank the organization for having given me this opportunity to be amidst you. Learning is a continuous process, and that has been my firm belief. And we are yet again here on this platform to have this opportunity of learning. And this learning is coming under a new perspective under COVID. Probably we do not know whether we would have had such intense learning on an online medium in a normal scenario. So with these few words, let me start my sharing. I would be sharing the next 30 minutes of presentation in the following format. I will be sharing with you a couple of what the COVID perspective that I from a industry scenario see. Subsequently, I'll be talking to you about what is the new normal in the industry. And the last section would be followed by what would be the new normal in from a HRM perspective. Friends, the truth is change is the only constant. It is yet again being proved under the current COVID scenario. COVID was unpredicted. COVID has been unprecedented. Therefore, we were unprepared and we were caught unawares. Be it the government, be it industry, be it family, all of us were caught unawares. All of us would have heard about the VUCA world, which we understand as being volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And the COVID has set beyond this a new narrative. I am reminded of my economics subject, which probably I would have studied, say, 30 years back. The theory of demand and supply is back again in play. It has become a vicious circle. A virus has brought the entire world to standstill. Would somebody have thought something of a virus? I'm sure we had classes of CBZ. Somebody would have studied microbiology. We would have studied about virus, bacteria, but I don't think we would have confounded any point in time that a virus would bring the entire world to standstill. And as we talk, we are amidst that. And that's the reality. And what has happened amidst this is facets of humility, integrity, accountability, responsibility, humanity has been questioned. I am sharing this from the perspective that China has been identified to be the perpetrator of this. I am sharing this, what has been reported, and what has it taken to the next level is that the entire world, barring some, have become anti-China. We cannot avoid considering dependency on China. That's yet another the fact. Reason being, considering their influence on economies. If you look at the data, the amount of influence that they bring across the globe on the dependencies of industries is unimaginable. The COVID has given us to understand, given us an opportunity to look back, nature versus nurture. Human versus environment dynamics has been tested. On a lighter vein, I came across, and though it is lighter vein, the fact remaining, humans were confined inside the homes, and we found animals moving really freely out of their habitats. The new world order is getting redefined. COVID has reinforced something very basic. There is no difference between rich and poor, the have and the have nots. Because the virus does not differentiate hierarchy, the virus does not differentiate class, creed, religion, nor geographies. Family are distancing from the departed. That's the most sad thing that can happen. But there is no deliberate action from family per se. It is the COVID situation which has put an enforcement of 20 for grieving, 50 for marriages. That's the type of condition that we are living in now. So what is it giving us? From RIP, which normally would give a condolence, rest in peace, I think it is time for us to yet again rise in RIP. What is this RIP different from the earlier one? All of us have to rise in peace. That is going to be the new normal. Travel, entertainment, family outing, everything has been redefined. Probably we wouldn't have realized that one day we all would be coming to a situation where all these things which used to be on a flip of a decision we would decide, today even for the last 3-4 months we have not stepped out, most of us. We need to learn to live with this like any other pandemic. I think that's the reality. I had my fellow speaker rightly sharing the statistics of how much of lives we have been lost, and as we talk we are being losing. The number of deaths that we lose by way of road accidents on a daily basis is nothing less than 2,000 to 3,000 on a daily basis. But what got alarmed is this virus that infected us, and you know what we are doing currently. Education has undergone change. It will undergo further and set new normal towards learning approach and relevance. Today, during the COVID, we have heard about free learning tools. We are having programs where there is free certifications, and there are certifications at a very nominal cost, which probably in a pre-COVID scenario, we would have to pay a bomb in terms of dollars or in terms of INR. From an industry perspective, we would have heard about in the balance sheet, in an P&L account, P&L account, profit and loss account, there is some provision called contingent liability. This contingent liability is provided in the books of accounts by companies for meeting unprecedented, uncontingent situations so that the business continuity is ensured. But the COVID was something which was not factored from a COVID perspective. Financial backup for sustaining this period, leading to many actions in industries, including people action. Coming to the industry, COVID scenario has redefined how the industry has to function. The new normal has been set. Why has this been set? There have been unprecedented orders being cancelled, unprecedented indefinite postponement of orders. Normally, industry works on credit periods. When we buy good, we take on credit. When we sell, the customer takes on credit. They have extended credit periods, redrawing, impacting the liquidity and cash flows in the company. While the liquidity and cash flows have been challenged, there is something as called as fixed cost outflow, which is the personal cost, the rentals, so on and so forth, that remained unaltered. So there is a big, again, I am bringing back a demand supply. While my revenue is not kicking in, my sale is not happening, but there are fixed costs that you need to pay out. Consumption has reduced globally. The basic vicious cycle again, there is footfall reduction across. And yet another, I remember my economics lesson, propensity to consume is something very key for market and economy. Today, we do not have the propensity to consume because there is no cash flow. People are not being paid. People have been laid off, so on and so forth. Therefore, it again impacts the demand and supply. Business continuity has been affected, resulting in employment challenges. Basis the new normal, business plans have been and are being redrawn, resulting in restructuring of the organization for the simple reason, for the year 2020-21, what was the budget from a revenue perspective has been turned on its head upside down. Therefore, the entire plan has to be rejigged. The revenue plan is being rejigged. And the question is, if an organization, if an industry has planned its manpower, keeping those plans in mind, today we are staring at a situation, do we require those many people to deliver the revised revenue, which is at least 40, 50, 60% lower than what was projected? So, this is the new normal. We are facing an outcome of this unprecedented situation, resulting in layoffs, resulting in retrenchment, resulting in closures. So this becomes a subject of concern for industry, and this needs to be driven by the HR folks. And the new normal for industry is more with less, and this is going to be the new normal. Interestingly, during the COVID, if you see, this has given an opportunity to the industry also. It has given an opportunity to the family, to one and all. It has given us the opportunity to continuously innovate. I'm sure each one of us will know what type of innovations has really kicked in. Take the liquid or the sanitizer dispensers. We could not use hands. People have started bringing up very simple innovations of bringing in non-contact pedal operated dispensers and the masks, for example. I don't think we would have thought that each one of us moving around across the globe today, we have one additional piece of mask covering our personality. And the personality is partly masked. And so there is continuous innovation coming our way, both at a personal level, at the industry level. Therefore, COVID has created opportunity in adversity for each one of us. And today we do not have a choice to avoid this. We have redefined business narrative. The new normal, the face mask, the social distance, the sanitization has impacted and is impacting the way we were conducting business. The business operation costs have increased. The reason being, with the new normal, with the COVID protocols, the number of the percentage of employees whom we can engage at an average across industry is not more than 50%. And the process that comes in from the point that they enter the factory, the point if they are traveling in the company transport, you cannot engage more than 25-30% of people sitting in a transport, which was unheard of. You would have seen our BMTC buses, state corporation buses, always is full and people are hanging in the footboard. So the business cost operations have increased. And for the business, the new normal has been offer more with less return, which leads to questioning the existence of industries and organizations, because viability becomes a problem, capability becomes a problem, therefore impacting revenue, profits. Contrastingly and interestingly, we have seen sunrise industries are doing business as usual. When we say sunrise industries, we talk about pharma, we talk about hospital, we talk about probably in the current context, the IT, ITES and BPOs. I think they have been largely unaffected. Reason, they were anyways having an option to work from home as a business model. But what you and I would have read and we are reading is that's going to be the new normal from a cost optimization perspective. Most of the IT companies, probably 80-90% of the workforce would be continuing to work from home going forward. And a couple of manufacturing organizations like us are also contemplating which of the businesses, which of the roles, which of the functions we can look at work from home options under the current scenario that we are facing. COVID has positively impacted telephony, internet providers. If we are on this call, there is somebody benefiting out of this as a business model. It could be the Airtels and the Geos or any of the service providers. So that industry is doing well. Work from home has resulted in cost optimization, and that has become a new normal. Manufacturing sector is also going to look at it, as I mentioned just now. Importantly, it has reinforced family time to a large extent, but you also have read what is the counterproductive effect of staying at home for a longer period. It has gone into certain family disputes and a couple of other challenges. Now, from a HRM standpoint, what is the new normal post-COVID? There is a shift from planning, strategic planning, to scenario planning. What would this mean? This would mean continuous response to challenges and accelerate learning to gain a competitive advantage, which means we need to be on the move on a day in, day out basis. We cannot be content with a plan being drawn and expect that plan and the assumption to work until the next year or the years to come. The way of working under COVID basis SOP has undergone change. I mentioned about it. The factors being social distance, mask, sanitization. The entire work process flow in an organization is tasked and challenged with these three norms, because if we compromise this, we run a risk of somebody contracting, we run a risk of the plant being shut for want of contaminating the place. Importantly, this scenario has led to availability of manpower challenge. There are shortage of guest workers, and I like this concept. We used to treat certain set of people as granted by calling the migrant workers as guest workers. I'm happy that as a professional, we have ensured dignity of labor, at least in the form of the name has been restored. The availability of shortage of manpower is just not because of the guest workers. It is because of the containment. It is happening because of the family pressure. It's happening because of the local pressures being enforced from panchayats and so on and so forth. We have seen this from an industry operation point where the employees are interested to come because we are operating on an essential service basis, but the panchayat and the family members bring down pressure on the employees by asking them not to step out. This has resulted in the most important thing probably, which was not very seriously taken across large industries. Employee safety has come into center focus across workplace work processes. Layoff, retrenchment, termination, pay cuts, delay in pay, labor laws are under severe pressure. Therefore, the situation that we are in is a right way to deal with, or my or our way of handling these situations. We see both these situations prevalent in industry as we talk. There are some who are adhering to the legal recourse. There are some who are just shutting shop just like that. Some have not even opened up post-COVID. Restructuring of organization has become unavoidable in the new normal. The reasons I mentioned some time back, because of the revenue, because of the business model, the restructuring has become a day in, day out event, most of the organization, because that's the way they can survive under the new normal to stay agile. The approach of organizations has become zero-based approach and to remove non-essential expenses, and as an organization become purpose-driven. So every single cost in the organization is being looked from a zero-cost base, and every spend is being closely monitored. There have been committees set up. What would have in the erstwhile got approved probably at my level, it goes up to next 2-3 levels. Hiring has been frozen across board with some exceptions. Work from home during lockdown, and we have come across that work from home during lockdown has its own dynamics to deal with. Employees have been categorized. My fellow speaker, Dr. Jose, mentioned, he touched upon this, and the categorization has been something like this. We have categorized people as essential, which means they are engaged, they are required minimum 8 hours and above in a day. We are talking about people who are partially engaged, who would not be engaged more than 50%. And there are the last chunk of people who come under categorization of being redundant. The redundancy comes because of restructuring. As a fallout of restructuring, there is a role optimization. Basis role optimization, positions have been optimized. This is the new reality which we are looking at. And there are simultaneous pay cuts across these 3 categories that I shared. While at organization level, some of us have been in the effort of taking out some outplacement support, though across industries recruitments have been reduced, have been frozen, but we are trying to help people. We have set up employee wellness programs to basically handle trauma, emotional and other psychological challenges that people would be going through at personal level, at professional level. Recruitment from a HR process standpoint have become online and contactless, which earlier we would have at least ensured there is one-on-one meeting happening. And this, if at all, some organizations are in the process of hiring. The hiring has become probably a standstill across board. Learning and development as an HRM approach has become largely online content. The content has been relooked in the new perspective. There are largely COVID related content to manage people, to support people, to handle this unprecedented times. The performance management system goal settings have been redefined. We have to recast the goals for the year and probably the years to come. And the process is going to become digital, and probably one-on-one meetings and other things would probably will be having a limited opportunity. Compensation and benefits are going to undergo change. The change would be in terms of its structure. The terms of compensation would be in terms of reduced pay under the new normal. Communication as a medium has undergone change, is undergoing change. From a one-on-one personalized communication, we are today talking about social distancing communication at a physical level, and we are on a digital medium to communicate. Employee engagement is getting redefined. The personal contacted employee engagements versus virtual engagements. Meetings have been redefined. We cannot be at a close distance. We cannot have more numbers at a place to meet. And the new normal is you have to meet only if it is required. And you will have to meet for a very short period, and you cannot meet for long. Probably it is a blessing in disguise for most of us that you need not sit through very long meetings. Work from home has come across a new concept of either we are working from home or at times we end up working for home, because there has to be a work-life balance when you are closely sitting at the home, which has become the workplace. Work-life balance has become it has become both a boon and a bane, because from a work from home, the unconditional, the unstated norm is that we can pick up and talk to our employees at any point in time. I think that will come under large scrutiny as we go. There is a big, huge psychological challenges around trust, fear, anxiety, which all comes under the mental health problems, mental health issues. Government departments with industries have come into virtual interactions. I have gone through personally with the principal secretary of industries, half a dozen meetings on the click of the button, 1 hour, 45 minutes, and we could crisscross our point of view and we could take a couple of actions which probably pre-COVID would have been a Herculean task to seek an appointment and walk up to the corridors of power. The new normal has set multi-skilling to make employees tech savvy. It has given opportunity for learning because there are huge platforms available for employees to learn. Therefore, the current reality of COVID versus Q3, Q4, which industry is predicting probably there would be a demand increase and the reality will come. The irony of the matter is today we are talking of loss of jobs. We are talking about we are not in a position to employ people because of revenue challenge. People are migrating, people are not coming. Probably in Q3, Q4, we will be sitting across opposite challenge. Even now the industries which have started are having shortage of manpower. Q3, Q4, we will be facing yet another challenge of shortage of people. Ability to manage ambiguity versus current reality is the new normal, which is the key managerial leadership qualities which will get tested. The work from home is going to bring new challenge, new paradigm. The new paradigm from legal perspective, because the work from home will bring in new dimension under the POSH Act. This is going to reset the IT Act, the Information Technology Act, because there will be IP infringements coming in. There will be IT requirements which will have to be relooked. There will be intellectual property challenges from an organization standpoint. There will be a commitment challenge. There will be a dual employment challenge that can come. And importantly, we need to set the new normal. How do we measure productivity from a work from home scenario? The annual increments, promotions is deferred, will be deferred, barring exceptions in some of the organizations. Retention and attraction of talent is going to be a big time challenge, because the market, the people are going to see organizations, how we are going to deal this COVID situation, how are we dealing this COVID situation. Organizations are here to exist, and post the COVID, we have to be in the market. So our actions are going to be measured, our actions are going to be seen. The emotional quotient will be a new key for leadership. Therefore, the new leadership trait like resilience, empathy are becoming key and being tested in the new normal of leaders. Stakeholder expectation management is going to be the key, because stakeholders have invested, shareholders have invested, who are part of stakeholders. How do we engage them in this new COVID scenario where revenues have been challenged? How do we reinforce confidence that we will bounce back and we will be going on the normal trajectory and bringing revenues back, and organization becoming performing organization, and we bring in profits? Workplace productivity is going to be impacted due to the new normal, which we spoke. HR's role in keeping business continuity is the new challenge beyond the earlier challenge. My fellow speaker, Dr. Jose, rightly spoke about strategic human resource management. The maintenance function of HRM is no more, it's a passe. The requirement of the HR is what strategic value do you bring to the table? You are measured on those. Legal jurisdictions have been challenged of the Industrial Disputes Act, the Disaster Management Act, the Epidemic Act, and Dr. Joe spoke about it. I will not dwell a little more detailed. While they had mandated that the payment has to be done, industry stared at a situation when I'm not having a revenue, how do I pay? I don't have a capacity to pay, while I have an intent to pay. So as we talk, the Supreme Court has struck it down. Now it has told the industry and the employees to sit across and come to a mutual solution to work under the new normal. So the new normal of coexistence has been redefined between the employer and the employee, which is the recent Supreme Court judgment on the MHA order. The new normal of employer and unions coexistence is coming into play. There has been collective ownership. The union understanding organization, organization understanding the workforce, sitting across the table, jointly co-owning and taking certain hard decisions to sustain and continue, so that there is sustainability of business as we move forward. And the new normal is how do we share the pie which we have amidst the stakeholders. Importantly, personal financial goal prioritization has become a key. You and I were spending, probably we had a thrift for spending. Today we are absolutely cautious about every single spend that we do. So the spending rationalization has come not only in organization, we as individuals, as families are also becoming and have to become conscious about how we spend. The financial planning has come into a play now. The new learning platforms we spoke about, there are free certification courses. This is an opportunity for us as students, as faculties, as industry employees to use this opportunity to reskill, upskill. We need to learn, relearn, unlearn to face the new normal. The shifting of operations is becoming a new normal. People are moving from an upscale city to a tier 2, tier 3 city from a cost perspective. Talent management is undergoing change. The talent management is being challenged around its talent pipeline, which is being impacted on the current scenario. The talent pool management has become a challenge. How do we manage this talent pool, whom we have identified as the leadership pipeline for us? The total rewards philosophy is undergoing change. Employment opportunity for freshers and those who have been undergone cessation of work by way of layoff, termination, retrenchment, resignation under any mode are facing a new challenge of being employed. compensation and benefits is being looked at from an employment cost and a management cost in the organizations. Therefore, I told the compensation and benefit is going to undergo change. The IT security policy is going to undergo change. Productivity norms are going to be reset. Digitalization of talent management, L&D, Comp and Ben is going to be the new normal across board. Probably the digitalization was already there in the IT, ITES, BPO, some part of the manufacturing, but today this will be the new normal, probably across the manufacturing sectors. The company's norms are going to change, I mentioned some time back, and the new components in the salary would be, there will be withdrawal of travel allowance, conveyance allowance, fuel reimbursement, driver salary, because we wouldn't see most of the people traveling. Probably we'll have new concepts of reimbursement of high-speed internet, laptops, probably printers, mental and physical health apps, home furnitures, domestic help support, so on and so forth. So friends, let me conclude by saying we have an opportunity to embrace this challenge or sit and look up to this COVID as a new epidemic that we have not faced ever before. Let me reiterate, this tough phase will also move on, and it will be the tough ones who will move forward, and the rest will left seated back and staring at the situation. I thank the institution for giving me this opportunity to share with you certain industry perspective on the subject of COVID and what HRM has the new imperative in the new normal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mohan Raj, for your excellent talk. It will be of great benefit to the academicians and students alike. So we have heard an academician who is a visiting professor in IIT and IIIT, and a hardcore practitioner of industrial relations and HRM. I request my colleague from our sister college, St. Joseph's Evening College, Mr. Dav Fod, head of the Department of Sociology, St. Joseph's Evening College, to give his remarks. And after that, the floor is open for question and answer session. Over to Mr. Dav Fod for the summing up.
Good evening, participants. I'm Dav Fod from St. Joseph's Evening College. I'll sum up both the talks in about 5 minutes. Dr. M.F. Jose started with drawing the relationship between organizations and the industry from the time we started the process of industrialization. He spoke about things like population growth and the pressures on resources that is going to affect the way in which we have been producing things. He spoke about the opening of the Indian economy in 1991 and the progress the Indian economy has had ever since. To talk about some statistics, he said that there are a few about 550 million people today in India using cell phones, which is a very big change in terms of the kind of things that have happened in our country. We spoke about the different sectors in terms of primary, secondary, tertiary, the unorganized, the organized, and we also spoke about the skilled and unskilled workers and their participation in various sectors of the organization. We looked at the total workforce, which stood at about 55 crores, of which 14 crores were migrants. And we said that 8 crore of them were self-employed. There has been a change in the way we looked at wages. There has been a fall in the wages in terms of the amount of money that has been paid out for wages. Statistics were given in terms of the kind of work people do. For example, the statistics about working conditions. 31% of of our country's population works in unhealthy working conditions. We looked at statistics with respect to rights of workers, and we said that India is very low in terms of the guarantee of rights to individuals who are working in organization. Uh, we also looked at various dichotomies. For example, despite all what has been said so far, the Indian workers were supposed to be the happiest, with 89% of them saying that they were very happy with the working conditions that were there. Participation of women in the workforce is seen as very low, even though we see very good education being given to them. But we also at the same time see a very big gap in the pay systems that are there. Then we looked at the industrial revolution, the different stages of the industrial revolution. We looked at the industrial revolution starting in 1784 with the steam engine. And then we moved on to the different stages, talking about mechanization, automation, and digitalization. And we also looked at the various changes in terms of the roles that the industrial relations experts and the HRM experts would play in these industries. We looked at how these industries came into existence only in the mid 1800s, and we have seen the different changes that have taken place ever since in their roles. We also looked at the concept of artificial intelligence and robotization of the work that we may be doing in the future. We said by 2022, we may be talking to our colleagues who may be robots. Is something that is something real, because we are looking at that kind of a change. The traditional roles of HRM have completely changed. They have today to play a very complex role, and then as a consequence of the coming in of COVID-19, there has been we have noticed a very big difference between the urban and the rural. We have seen in the last 3 months over 300 deaths due to either starvation or due to accidents on roads. The new changes that have taken place is that a large section of the industry is today talking about working from home. We have had changes in lifestyle. Social distancing has become a norm. And in the last 2 or 3 months, we have seen a complete collapse in the economy. We have looked at several psychological effects. For example, what is the effect of this lockdown on stress? We have looked at what people think about risk of infection. We have looked at what are the effects of the lockdown on financial responsibilities of individuals with respect to their family, education, health, and things like that. Effects on business. We spoke about a few studies that talk about which businesses are making profits. We looked at how revenues have been badly hit from companies that were making profits in terms of thousands of crores to a few hundred crores, and how that has changed the way they would be looking at their workforce and how they would be making changes in the way they would work itself. We spoke about the way forward. We looked at things like the issue of trust as a consequence of work from home. We looked at change of roles and the changes in rules and regulations. For instance, how is it that we work from home and we make sure that we can measure productivity? How do we build relationships in organizations when we are working from home? We looked at things like different businesses For example, how certain businesses like Dunzo and Zomato have become more important than the traditionally important organizations. We also looked at how intrinsic motivation becomes a very important aspect of managing businesses. We saw how we responded to COVID-19, how we revive and how we get to normal in terms of all the practices that were there prior and the changes that need to be brought about in terms of the changes that are required for the new organization. That was the summing of the presentation by Dr. Jose. I move to Mr. M. Mohan Raj as of now. Mohan Raj sir started with the conversation of how we were completely caught unaware of a small thing like a virus, and how different people never thought that something as small as a virus could bring a change in the way we work. It has brought the entire world to a standstill. Today, we see China as an enemy of our economy, of our world, because of the millions of people who have been affected and a few lakh people who have died. We also realize that it is not possible for us as a country or the world to survive and exist and continue doing businesses without China being the basic supplier of a lot of products that they would make. He is focused on distancing of families from society because of the new social norms that were there. For example, he brought out the problems with respect to marriages and debts. 50 people for marriages and 100 people for debts were seen as big changes that have taken place in terms of what has happened. All aspects of life basically has changed. Change to learning has changed. How do you learn today has gone through a big change. We are sitting in a conference today that is live online because of a disease or a virus that is COVID-19. We have looked at things like free certification, free courses, courses that were being offered for large sums of money being offered today online. For a very meager sum of money, you just need to go online, click on a link, and you will go through a course and you will be able to upgrade yourself in terms of skills. How do organizations or how do businesses define their functions? Mr. Mohan spoke about the changes that have taken place in the last 45 to 3 months in terms of the way businesses have changed. There have been big changes in terms of the orders that were placed, cancellation of orders. There has been no money that has been transferred for orders that are existing at this point in time. People don't want to take finished products because the demand for these products have reduced. People are unable to pay credit because they don't have the money. And this is a very big vicious circle that has been created around these businesses. Business plans have to be restructured and redrawn because of the new normal that has been created. Sunrise industries, some of the sunrise industries, for example, the software industry, the supply chain in terms of small businesses like Dunzo and Zomato have gained some predominance. But by and large, sunrise industries where people can work from home seem to be in a better position to survive than the traditional industries where you need to go to the workplace and do work. People have certain industries that are traditional, that have a traditional base, are also looking today at who is it who needs to come to the organization. Do I need all my employees to come to my organization for productive businesses to take place, or is it some people can still stay at home, do work? When we return from COVID-19, do we need to rethink of taking back people whose jobs have become redundant is another thing that Mr. Mohan spoke about. We have had a change in the kind of things that have become more important today. For example, service providers like telephones, cell phones, data has become more important today. There has been, as a consequence, as people have started to work from home, there has been a reduction at the level of personal expenses. For example, transport costs to and from work have reduced, which has consequently made it possible for families to get together, stay in one room. Of course, there have been a big change in the social ramifications to that, in the sense about the way in which families started to interact. We have had to change terms, like the term guest worker has become important today. It has brought back the dignity of labor into the workers. You have had to restructure organizations because of the new model. You have had to relook at compensation and benefits as a consequence of the reduced revenues that organizations have started to take. Hiring has become redundant as a function, or it has frozen as a function. Most organizations are not hiring. Even if they're hiring at a very, very slow pace. This is another thing that has become as a consequence of COVID-19. You've also had role optimization. You have had a very big change in terms of what kinds of roles people take in organizations. Welfare programs of employees have had to be restructured. Rearrangement has become an online process. Compensation and benefits have changed. Communication, the networks of communication have become online. You don't have a system where you would have things like notice boards and things like that anymore. Meetings have been redefined. Today we are looking at online meetings. Work-life balance. I'm spending a lot of time in my house, and therefore I'm able to spend a lot more time in my house. I'm finding a lot of things to be done in my house, and that's a big change that has taken place. There have been mental health issues, trust issues within the organization. Can I trust the employee with working from home, etc.? There has been depression on the rise as a consequence of this kind of a change in work style. There has been also a big shortage in terms of the human resources that you will require. Human resources that would be very easily available in the past, for example, in the construction industry today, would be very, very difficult to find. The next question was, how do you measure productivity? Measure productivity for people who are working from home. What is the challenge is to measure what kind of work you're doing. Retrenchment and acquisition have become a completely different kind of a ball game. Leadership skills require a lot more empathy today, and there's a lot of emphasis on value systems for the leadership that are there. Roles of HR are going on changing as a consequence of these kinds of changes. Legal disputes have been redefined. How do you fight? A legal battle has completely changed. Union and management have changed their relationships, because unions and management both now understand that it is not possible for them to survive without getting through some sort of a discussion and dialogue, so that relationship has also changed. Moving of operations from tier 1 to tier 2, tier 3 cities have become an order of the day because of the availability of cheap resources. And Mr. Mohan also spoke about a few other changes like this. So I conclude the summary with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dav Fod,
Good evening,
for
everyone.
your summary. I request Ms. Maria David and Mr. Dav Fod to conduct the question answer session. The floor is now open for question answer session. Please go ahead, Madam Maria and Mr. Dav Fod. The technical team, please come on board.
I'll ask the first question. This is to Dr. Jose. It reads this way: due to COVID-19, and the pharmaceutical industry has had a boon in its revenues. But after the pandemic ends, wouldn't the industry have a big downfall? Other industries such as construction would be a loss on property rates per square feet, etc. What would the outcomes of this be?
Yeah. So I'll start with giving a response on the pharmaceutical industry first. I'm not too sure on what basis the question is assumed that in post-COVID times that there could be a backlash in terms of the pharmaceutical industry, because I see a surge. The reason is today the pharmaceutical industry is around 55 billion US dollars in 2019 and 20. Their main export destinations are US, UK, Canada, and Middle East. So while if you look at the pandemic, all of these regions are mostly affected by the pandemic, and there is a lot of drug that is required continuously there. Unlike in these countries where we buy off-the-counter drugs just going to a medical shop without prescription. When you go there without a proper prescription, without proper things, you will not get any of these things. First thing. Second thing is you will also have a high price to pay. Now, where your point is valid is there is a likelihood of supply chain disruption because of raw materials that is unlikely to come. First thing, because many of these raw materials are also sourced from China. So now with the government taking a stand, there are geopolitical issues that is coming up. I think there is going to be a little unfriendly way of looking at it. And then also the Prime Minister has talked about Atmanirbhar, where self-reliance, which has been spoken about but reintroduced again. Now, the outcome of that is the inventory and stock will go up. The moment that happens, your cash flow will go down, and then you will start laying off people, because that's the first easiest thing to look at. Now, for this not to happen, look at the other side of it from the economy. Your inflation is catching up. Your seventh day today or sixth day today continuously, while the crude is down globally, we have increased our taxes. Okay. Now, instead of looking at all of these things, what probably the government could look at is how do you reimburse the GST faster of all of these folks? How do you reduce the dependence on European Union? So how do we build synergies with the European Union now with the pandemic slowing down in the European Union? Is it possible to establish new markets there? I think that is one of the things. Apart from the supply chain industry, but however, if you look at some of the big players in the industry today, I don't think will have a great impact. In fact, sales is going to be huge and revenue will also be a great thing. Coming to the construction industry, I think this is where there is, a lower sentiment, I would say, because see, the idea before COVID was it would probably in 2025 to 30 reach 1 trillion as an industry, which would contribute to probably around 13 to 14% of our overall GDP, which is huge. Now, the problem is migrant workers are the construction workers. They have all gone. Major chunk of them have gone. Now there is no clarity as to when they would return, because they are struggling with food, they are struggling with water, health, basic issues, which they are not wanting to return back because they've gone through a lot of pain. And that is one of the areas that I think we have probably not scaled up to. Before even lockdown, were in thousands. We could have potentially or probably gone ahead and identified, worked with the state governments, identified the migrants, looked at either sustaining them or probably, helping them to move out, and we would probably avoided a larger tragedy or a tragic situation of pandemic spread. Unlike the only state in Kerala, which opened out, community kitchens and fed people. But again, the question comes, whether is that a sustainable way to look at? That is another thing, considering that their philosophy is a little different. Now, what will happen? The immediate interim thing will be apartment blocks and houses will not be sold, which means construction companies will be completely choked with lack of cash flow. Supply chain materials are not going to come easy now, because you have cement, you have sand, you have all of these kind of things, which also has a dependency on labor, which has a dependency on transport. We are talking about 1.5 million economy, which means our social distancing norms going to be respected by the this sector. Is another important aspect to be considering, the labor force. So labor force is a big challenge for the next 3-4 quarters. It is unpredictable. What can the government do? I think GST and tax holiday is the solution that I can probably look at. If there is any assurance from the government in terms of welfare and the rights of the migrant workers in terms of health, safety, food, I think that is another important thing that is going to build confidence among the migrant workers. The sentiments of the purchaser also is an important reality here, because right now people are not going to buy apartment blocks and things because you never know what is going to be in store for tomorrow. Look at the figures today in terms of the pandemic and the kind of situation that we are facing. It looks like people are not going to spend money on things which are not required for now. Probably they would take a call, is it required now, or it can wait for some time. So given the two segments of the industry between pharmaceutical and construction, I would say pharmaceutical is much better off. Construction is going to have a huge, deeper impact.
So second question for you is with respect to the question on the migrant workers, not with respect to workers in India, but with respect to workers in the Middle East, the US, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, and places like that. Now, if you look at the United States, it's already banned H-1B visas. They're not issuing H-1B visas anyway. There are no flights at this point in time to go there or to come back. What do you think would be the scenario in the next 2 quarters with respect to these kinds of jobs that were available? Of course, we have been seeing a slowdown in the economy across the globe, but what do you think is going to happen in the next 2 quarters or next 3 quarters? Do you think this is going to change, or are we going to have more protective kind of regimes that bring in policies that are going to protect jobs for people who are abroad, in their own countries?
Sure. So one, these are not domestic workers. These are people who are in different parts of the geography and who are typically, working there. Now, the point to which you said in terms of the H-1B visas, I think there is also a lot of geopolitical and political issues there in terms of, this is the election year in the United States. So you have a Republican versus, a Democrat standoff there, first thing. Trump being who he is, I think sometimes one of the things as a pattern that I see is there are certain decisions he takes abruptly. There are certain decisions that he rolls back, probably within a week or so. Say, for example, he using the mask. When the whole world was asking people to use mask as a part of protection, he refused to, and he was walking around in open. Second thing, now with the civil rights issues and the curfew and the scenario in the United States, his competitor Joe Biden seems to be slightly on the edge of gaining some popularity. Though, of course, Trump has a lot of base, like our Prime Minister Modi here. Now the question is, right now there is a lot of negativity that is there in terms of the leadership sentiments echoed by various past presidents as well. So given that scenario, he will, and it is bound, and it is not a surprise that he would ban H-1B visas, because he would say, bring back companies to United States from China, and I'm going to give you tax free. Otherwise, I'm going to tax you if you go to India. The other thing is, I don't want migrants. I want our people to be employed first, who are. Now, you look at the economic side of it. Let's forget the politics. If you look at the economics, let's talk about IT, and IT is industry which supports largely the North American markets. The business is around $150 billion, and probably it'll rise to around $300 billion in a year or two. Now, that's a huge segment. Now, business has not impacted because, IT work has been continuing. It has slowed down a bit. Of course, role rationalization, looking at the right size of teams, engaging the client, all that is happening. But the point is, when you look at from a per hour standpoint, India is costing probably around $16 to $17 per hour for IT work. Whereas if the same worker is moved to United States with their, insurance, with their health benefits, with all of those basic things, it would definitely cost nothing, less than $40, $30 to $40. Now, as a entrepreneur, would you be interested in, making those margins through these kind of offshoring and outsourcing? Or would you be playing a very political, sentimental, nationalistic card? In my view, I don't think people would play politics and nationalistic views. And the same thing applies even in India with regard to China as well. So it's not going to be sustainable. Okay. At some point of time, we need to reconcile the fact that we are a global community. We are global citizens. We need to collaborate. Like, for example, we have many of the big companies today working together to bring vaccines, who are competitors in the billion-dollar market. Now, given all of these things, these are phases that we go through where it could be because of political reasons or other reasons where we will take a small hit. First thing. Second thing, with regard to bringing back the migrants, in my view, I have read a lot of articles. I have heard from people. I have even had narrations and stories, anecdotal data from people where they say, if they come to India, the probability of they getting infected is very high. Take, for example, the case of Kerala. They came to, single digit numbers in terms of the infected people last few months, or probably the last month. The moment, the Vande Bharat Express started ferrying people from the Middle East and some other places, the infection rate increased. So I think it would be a better way if we all, use our wisdom to look at some of the data points and analyze some of these things, and connect with those people, to talk to them and say, what are some of the reasons why we don't want you? We are not wanting you to be back is not the question. It is, there is a purpose behind it, and that is one of the reasons why. And there is going to be cost attached to it. Some of the Middle East countries are waiving cost for Indians to go back, whereas Indian government is charging them the flight charges. That is another set of things that you must have heard about. There are a lot of complicated intricacies and nuances in the whole thing. For the welfare and for the safety of most of the people, I think it would be good to stay put until the next 2 or 3 quarters when things are, better off. Probably that's the right time to kind of look at and migrate. While these kind of geopolitical, political, and various other popular issues will, come, I think people will take a call and then, take a decision on that as well. At least that's my perspective.
Dave, can we have one final question for Mohan Raj?
Okay. Sir, I would like to ask you a question with respect to the HR policies. The government has actually suspended some of the rights of workers. What is the impact of a change like this on their ability to get compensation, to get fight for their rights and things like that? When we say suspended labor laws, what is the recourse to such employees?
See, when we talk about suspension of labor laws, let me make a correction here. The government has not suspended any labor laws. What has basically happened is, if you look at India as a country and the Labor Act from its enactment, couple of acts are very archaic and it has been set in the pre-British periods and immediate post-British periods, and we have evolved. The way we need to be doing business is continuously undergone change. The way of living for the laborers have undergone change. So the enactments are also undergoing change. Under the COVID regime, there has been no laws that has been rewritten. What they have basically done is, from the perspective of protecting labor rights, under the unprecedented situation of COVID, where industry is also striving, because for the reason that I shared, there are no orders, there is no revenue coming in, sustenance is becoming a challenge. So how do we really do it? So from this perspective, the Ministry of Home Affairs made it mandatory that during the lockdown period, the industry should ensure the laborers or the workmen are paid on time and there is no deductions. This set into multiple level of discussions, representations, employers also expressing their inability, the government coming up with the Epidemic Act and the Epidemic Act, and the legal luminaries started questioning the grounds under which the government is enforcing rights on the employer. From a fundamental rights perspective, both employers and employees have their fundamental right. It cannot be infringed upon. So over the past 2 to 3 months, as we talk to yesterday, today, Supreme Court has now realized that you really cannot infringe. And now it is advised that both the industry and the employee sit across and mutually agree and take a call on the payments. This is one part. Labor laws is going to undergo change from a ease of doing business perspective. We have seen multiple states making amendments. Karnataka also went in to facilitate the COVID environment. People extended extra working. That was looked from 2 different lenses from both the stakeholders. The union found that that will be abused by the industries, but the actual facilitation was that from the current restriction of having 48 hours of weekly working, they told you can extend it up to 60 hours. The rider was that over and above that 48 hours you make people to work, you need to pay as per the provisions of overtime. So there was no infringement on payout anywhere, just to make a point.
Okay, Anup, sum it up, please. Thanks.
Yes, I request HOD, Dr. Berin Lukas, do you have any remarks to make, ma'am? And that will be followed by formal Thanksgiving by Mrs. Maria David. Member
Okay.
Organizing Committee.
All right.
Over to your remarks, Berin, madam.
Dr. Jose and Mohan Raj, I think this is one of the best informative webinars we have had so far. Both your talks were excellent. It was very simple to understand, very logically prepared, and I'm sure if I look back, both of you have taken a lot of time and energy to prepare it in spite of your busy schedule. So I would like to thank you on behalf of our college and the Industrial Relations and Sociology Department. I'd like to thank you once again for the effort that you have put in. So thank you, Dr. Jose, and thank you, Mohan Raj.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure indeed. This is a way of giving back to the society at large and alumni in specific.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Maria, Member Organizing Committee.
Good evening, everyone. So special thanks to Dr. Jose and Mr. Mohan Raj for sharing valuable information to our participants this evening webinar. So thank you very much, Dr. Jose and Mohan Raj.
Thank you. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, Madam Maria.